Welcome everyone to another episode of Geek Vibes Interview brought to you by Geek Vibes Nation. I'm your host, Don Fisher, and today I have with me an innovator. He's a producer, writer, YouTube personality, and storyteller. He's produced such films as Machine Gun Preacher, Dread, The Voices, and The Gray, which made him the youngest producer to have a #1 film at the American box office. He's also produced some of your favorite viral one-shot films such as The Punisher, Dirty Laundry, Power Rangers Unauthorized, all under his subversive bootleg universe. More recently, he has been the executive producer for the Netflix original series Castlevania. I'd like to welcome Adi Shankar. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, man, it's good. I'm glad
fantastic.
I'm glad we got to sit down.
Yeah.
Man. I'm glad we got to sit down. I think I first saw your work. I believe it was the Power Rangers popped up on YouTube, and I was like, it looked gritty and looked dark, and what is this? And I watch, and I'm like,
you're like, this was what my childhood actually was like, gritty and dark.
Yeah. Well, I was like, man, like this is the kind of like with like growing up watching Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, X-Men, Batman. You're like, they have all these weapons, but yet nothing's getting chopped off, nothing's getting stabbed. Like, how can you have,
Yeah, where's the exit wound?
Right. So like,
where's that exit wound at?
It was so good. So to kind of get the ball rolling, like what, I guess from your childhood to that beginning stages of like The Punisher, what led you to that point? What kind of inspired you into this process and then into film?
Into making fan films?
Yeah.
So it was like summer vacation when I was in college. So it was like summer vacation going into sophomore year of college. I found a video on a torrent site. This is before YouTube, so we're talking like 2000, 2004. This is before videos were on YouTube, and I found a Batman fan film by a guy named Sandy Cholera called Batman Dead End. Right, and spoiler alert for someone who hasn't seen this. It's kind of like old school Batman. He's fighting the Joker, and then all of a sudden, Alien shows up, and then it ends with like Batman fighting Alien and then Predator. And I went into this like having no idea, like, hey, is this official? Is this unofficial? Who made this? This is crazy. This is awesome. Like, and I guess Batman fighting Alien and Predator is pretty out there. If all you consume is like film and TV. But for those of us who were into comics, especially in the 90s, you had all sorts of crossovers, right? I think like DC and Marvel were less walled off. Like you had Batman and Witchblade, Batman and Judge Dredd. You had so crossing over with intellectual properties that necessarily may not have on the surface coexisted coherently, and then bringing in a Frank Miller to make Terminator and RoboCop synchronize, that was a trend. So this felt very much in line with that. That was a tangent, and that stuck with me. And yeah, so thank you, Sandy Cholera. And I was like, why is this guy not making every Batman movie ever? So yeah, I was inspired by a guy named Sandy Cholera.
How much? Because I feel like, I don't know the proper word I like to use, but I feel like you're kind of the industry shaker-upper that we all want. We all want. Like we keep getting remakes and reboots, but it's essentially the same thing a lot of time. But when you see these subversive one shots, you're like, yeah, like do something different, make this, take it up a level. And I mean, when you have the people who own these IPs versus the fan, was there a lot of backlash from the, like, say,
The rights holders?
Yeah. From when you did these?
Sure, maybe at one point. At another point, there was also confusion. You know, I feel like the world is also pivoted so heavily towards digital, towards the internet, towards fandom, really, right? When I was, I don't want to say coming up in the business. This is like right before I got here. Being a fan was a bad thing because content was made for a very, very broad audience because it just was super expensive to make, was extraordinarily more expensive to market. So the economic apparatus around how stuff is / was made necessitated everything to essentially alienate the core fan base. Right? You had to like change it to make it as broad as possible. So like Midwest mom will show up to watch this thing, right? Now the advent of digital technology, streaming and whatnot, not only did it make the cost of production significantly lower, it's also made the cost of marketing significantly lower. And by that, I mean, think about it in terms of every dollar you spend as a studio, like not me, like not you, like as a studio, if you're a corporate entity, right. Every dollar you spend today in matching a piece of content with its prospective customer is much lower and much more effective, right? Because we get like targeted ads now, right? Like you say in your phone, like, you know what I'd really like? A Wildcats movie. Yeah, like Jim Lee's Wildcats, man, that would be so rad. Like, you know, back in the 90s, that was just a conversation you were having with your buddy. Now your phone's like spying on you, sending it to the government, then getting it like disseminated. And then Facebook's like, yo, all right. Good to know. If you know, hey studio, if you ever make that Wildcats movie, we got like a Rolodex of people who want it, who said that they want it just out loud. And pretty soon it's going to be like, you know, with the Neuralink and once it's going to be like, oh man, you thought it, so therefore you want it. So I digress. It's created now a economic apparatus, as in the entertainment ecosystem has an economic apparatus that allows more targeted content. Right. So I think that shift has happened on a corporate level as well. Right. And also the way word of mouth travels today is very different than it did when when I was growing up, or you were growing up. I just made an assumption about your age. You may be like fucking 19 and I just offended the shit out of you. I apologize. Yeah. I mean, you had a 19-year-old with a thick beard. So the economic, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? See, I do that. I'll make like a side joke and go on a tangent, and then I'm like, you know, they're like, "What did he say? I don't know."
But does it? I mean, with it, everything going towards that, like making this big media. Oh, you talking word of mouth? Word of mouth.
Right. So, yeah, word of mouth. Right. So, you know, the evangelical fan base that then will go online and talk about it in a way, the diehard is more important to the corporation today, right, than the casual viewer.
Yeah, it's very
so
weird.
the world is flipped.
Yeah,
right? Like, so when a guy like Todd McFarlane says the nerds won, the nerds have inherited the earth, like he's absolutely right. And by that, he means the economic incentive structure around the world has flipped so that being a nerd is more valuable to civilization than being like a casual person who just doesn't have a depth of interest.
Yeah, it's almost to the point where if you're not part of some fandom, or you have this inkling of like something you really love, you're not gonna see probably what you want, because it is, like you said, so like, right at you now. It's more narrow based, which a lot of us like. We get to have all these superhero films now that we didn't get on a regular basis before, and now they're like, oh, they want this, cool, we'll just throw them at you. And now we just want like more pinpoint to a certain storyline that doesn't.
Brother, it's gone beyond that, man. Like you go back, like there were generations that got like one superhero movie for like an entire generation. They had to like, you know what I mean? They'd be like, yeah, it's only one movie. They're like waiting, they're like praying for like a sequel or something, right? Now we're not even getting like we're getting like all the superheroes in one movie. You know what I mean? Like abundance was 5 years ago. This isn't even abundance anymore.
Yeah, it's just commonplace now. It's like it's expected.
Like Ant-Man is a niche character.
Yeah, for sure.
The fact that Loki is it's insanity. We're like literally living in a parallel universe where I was making a joke. It was gonna be a terrible joke. But yeah, I mean, it's all insane. And props to everyone. Props to the ecosystem for making this happen, right? Because this didn't just happen at random. It was sites such as yourself, such as comicbook.com, Screen Rant, Collider that pushed this. This was visionaries like Kevin Feige who effectively created an entire cinematic universe and cinematic ecosystem that is effectively self-sustaining. It's visionaries and hyper talented people like the Russo brothers who elevated the material in a way that was a perfect marriage between mass consumer, mass audiences, but also staying true to the source material and elevating the source material. I mean, it was really just an entire generation of creators who are older than you and me who flipped the narrative, right? I mean, if you go back to like the 90s, like people just cared about like gangster movies and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah, it's a gritty mob story. I'm like, what? Like, I'd rather see a movie about a dude with armor. Like, dude, what's armor? Like, what, mob movie? What?
Do you feel
I don't know any mobsters. Like, they're both as fantastical. You know what I mean? They're both equally fantastical. Like, in fact, I have gotten closer to people who have a lot of disposable resources to build innovative technological armors to coat themselves than I have to like mobsters, you know?
Do you feel like you can say that, with confidence, that you are part of the reason why this is happening with like your bootleg universe? I mean,
no, absolutely not. No, that's such an exaggeration.
I mean,
no, dude. I'm a drop in the, not even a blip on this, man. I'm not even on the map there. That's just no, absolutely not. I mean, it's one thing to make a few short films that go viral. It's a completely different story to manage an entire company that's putting out a series of feature-length films, multiple feature-length films every year. And TV series. It's yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I think just the fact that you were able to take something and then they see how many views it garners. I mean, there's got to be somebody who was like, "Hey, like this guy's doing something that no one else is doing. Maybe we should kind of follow suit a little bit, and we can create this universe that can build for a decade."
Hmm.
Maybe a little. There's always somebody watching.
I don't know. I feel like if there is an area where maybe there's a little ahead of the curve. Maybe it's more on the video game side of the equation.
Okay.
Um, because video games, as I reflected on it, video games have evolved so rapidly.
Mhm.
When you look at the NES era of video games, then SNES, then N64, every era of games, they're indistinguishable from. Sorry, yeah, they're so different from one another. It's the medium and the art form just level jumped on such an astronomical level that um, games really came of age when uh, for like people in our age group. So we can really speak
Yeah,
to what we love about them, and
for sure.
um, and again, so back to your whole thing about nerd culture and fandom, like you go a generation back. I mean, like a guy like Michael Uslan, right? I don't know if you know who Michael Uslan is, but he very sweet man. He acquired the Batman rights when no one thought this was a viable movie, and he's been a producer on every Batman thing since the Tim Burton movies onwards, and Guillermo del Toro with Hellboy,
Yeah.
and Blade. His Blade 2 movie was rad. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel absolutely like I feel like if I contributed anything to the comic book nerd thing, it was very, very minuscule. I mean, we have multiple generations of artists older than us who grew up loving these things and dreamed of adapting them, using the tools that they had available to them, both in terms of just technology and in terms of like cameras and CGI, but also like distribution mechanisms and stuff like that, right? Like, so.
Do you feel like, so I know you started off, a lot of your career started off in producing film, but you've made this transition, right, with with Castlevania, to where you're on these digital platforms, and you're able to expand the story and tell a more in-depth story. Um, you know, do you feel like you made that move at the right time? Because I know now you have the rights to Devil May Cry. Um,
Mhm.
and which is
Yeah.
a beloved franchise. And now, we've seen what you do with Castlevania, that you're able to like really give people what they want. Because when some of the stuff that's early on, people, what the fans may like it, but they're like, there's something missing. So what do you think that you're adding to these properties?
That's it.
Nah, it's good.
Cool. So what do I contribute to these franchises? You know, so I guess now you've pivoted to the video game of it all, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so comics are like books. They're not even like they are books. They're literary stories, right? Video games are such a new and complex art form. There's no one way to adapt a video game, and also, um, yeah, like Mega Man and Dark Souls are both technically video games, but they're so radically different in terms of like lore and story, and so there's no one singular blueprint on how to do this.
Right.
And sometimes, just to play out this intellectual exercise, right? Sometimes what you're doing is really creating lore around what exists. And sometimes it feels more of like a translation, like you are adapting a book.
Right.
Like one would be adapting a book. So, you know, each property is its own beast, its own animal. And you know, I think like with something like Devil May Cry, I intimately understand that property because I played every game, and it wasn't like, oh, okay, now I have this property, now I'm going to go back and play. Like I was organically part of the fandom as the franchise was evolving and then not coming out and then all of a sudden back. You know what I mean? So I'm part of the fandom ecosystem. So
right.
when you exist as a fan in that level, I feel like it becomes easier, at least for me, to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, it's always multiple choice, and there's always multiple paths to do. Right. It's not like, okay, this is the thing and everything else is wrong.
I mean, you essentially know what choices to make, right? I mean, you know what to lead into this fantastic story and what is like, okay, that was a little short one. Let me not focus on that thing. And, you know, I feel like that's probably what like.
Right. And you're also asking yourself, you know, when you're playing a game, you're asking yourself questions.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I wonder what that's like, or I wonder what's going on there. And now you're like, whoa, I get to explore that. That's dope. You know, so these things kind of evolve organically. And again, we're talking specifically about Devil May Cry here, right? So I just to clarify that, because there are other things I'm working on, and those are, and then you enter them differently because they're inherently different in terms of their DNA.
I assume this is going to be animated, right?
Devil?
Yeah.
Devil May Cry? Yeah.
Okay, so like,
yeah.
I'm sure at some point you've been approached for maybe making whether it's Castlevania, Devil May Cry, and your newest one, Captain Laserhawk, into live action. Why or why not? You know, are you taking this, or I guess why are you taking the route of animation rather than live action?
That is an amazing question. So the last few years, you're absolutely right. I've just completely walked away from live action. I'd say there were really three things that caused that transition. One, I got into this industry to do animation, to do specifically what I'm trying to do with, you know, Devil May Cry and these other properties. When I moved to Los Angeles, the first thing I did was I made an Excel spreadsheet of all the IPs that I dug as a kid, like Voltron, G.I. Joe, everything. And then I was like, who's the rights holder? How do I get this so that I can make hard R, dark anime, like OVAs of these things, right? And I had all these like really fucked up stories of like, okay, well, you know, Voltron, you do it like this, and it's kind of Top Gun, but and you know, as I went down the process, I realized, well, oh wow, the same companies tend to own most of the stuff, right? So that was interesting, and there really wasn't a way to make these things. It was just so complex, and like people weren't doing it in a way that was easily accessible. And the feature and the movie thing, the door kind of just opened. So I was like, okay, this is the universe giving me this thing. But like deep down, like that's what I wanted to do was make animation for adults, which were dark retellings of these properties I grew up with as a kid. And I had some insane meetings. Like I had a meeting with Marvel before. This is pre-Disney.
Okay.
With Marvel, because there was a company called Toons in India that had the rights to make X-Men. And they created a show called Wolverine and the X-Men, and it was just a complete kind of cluster. And I was like, okay, I can go in, work with them, take this, and do Age of Apocalypse. Because really, all I wanted to do was do Age of Apocalypse in the X-Men, the animated series, the '90s X-Men, the animated series style, right? So that was actually the kind of the end goal, and I was literally, yeah, it like felt like this was going to happen for like a split second, then it didn't, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. So one, animation, it was like a fantasy of mine. Two, it became kind of agoraphobic for a little bit. I think that's the word, agoraphobic, where you just kind of don't want to leave and go places.
Yeah.
And what's amazing about animation is you can just do it from a laptop sitting at home.
Yeah.
And you can like review all the animatics and and do all that. You don't have to show up on location or on set and whatnot. And three, live action started feeling to me very suffocating because there's so many moving parts. And when you're invested in making it sounds pretentious, but a piece of art or something with its own identity.
Yeah.
Right? It can be infuriating when it feels like the people around the engine that's making it are like trying to make a schedule.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, we're not here to make a schedule. We're here to make this. Like no one, or maybe some people care, but like about like, oh man, this movie got shot in 14 days. Isn't that great? You're like, well, no, you should have made it in 25 days.
You're right.
Like you should have done 25 days. It would have clearly been better. And I didn't have the vocabulary to really explain that, because I was a lot shyer back then. I mean, if you look back at interviews when I was talking a couple of years ago, like I was stumbling on my words. I didn't know how to speak. I mean, English is like in some ways, English is my second language.
Right.
So I didn't have the tools and the vocabulary to express that in the live action thing. And it just feels overwhelming when you show up on set and there's all these people and there's all these expectations and whatnot. But I feel like I now have the tools and the vocabulary. So I may be working on that as we speak on a live action thing that may or may not be announced. So I'm neither confirming nor denying that I've done that. But that was a journey I had to go on in order to really understand how to articulate and express a vision.
Yeah, and I think the anime train is getting packed as of the past probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, where people are still like are continually to like bring their friends like, oh, check out this story. And I think that's where some people who don't watch it don't understand, is that the story is what grabs everybody. The animation is dope and we all love it, but it's also the storytelling that kind of it captivates you. I mean, because it is more adult most of the time, the ones like the bigger ones, and we get to fully immerse ourselves in this world. And it doesn't, I don't know, it is a different feeling that when a show, like when we have a live action show, when you're watching it, it kind of feels like, okay, this is the end of the show. It's like a certain feel with human beings that it has. But when it's an anime, you're literally on the edge of your seat the entire time,
Another way of phrasing what I think you're saying, which I totally feel, live action has a language. There's a cinematic language. So especially when it's a TV show, TV shows have a language. They have a format and a language. And based on how that language has evolved, projects are edited a certain way. The score is composed a certain way, especially in the West. In Europe, it's done a little differently. And with animation, with anime specifically, because it's such it's an art form that constantly forces innovation.
Mm-hmm.
The storytelling rules are constantly being subverted. And also, since there's so much competition, they have to be subverted.
That's true.
Right? So, and I guess there's also another nuance to this whole thing. The way the business around live action storytelling, long form storytelling works, right? And so long form is effectively TV. So you either fall into like, hey, we're a movie or we're a TV.
Right.
And sure, there are things like the MCU that are effectively a hybrid, but for most things, it's movie or TV. The way the TV deal is structured, there's something about it that kind of locks certain choices in, versus on the anime side of the equation, you can really do long form, long-term storytelling, and you're only limited by the imagination. Right. But again, like, that's completely changing as well, because, well, there's just a lot more stuff being made, period. Not just TV shows, not just for streaming, but there's just a lot more stuff being made every day, right? Like everyone has a video and editing software like readily available to them. So that's changing every day. And then on top of that, on the live action front, the process of making live action anything, especially on the higher end of the spectrum, higher end in terms of budget, but this is also trickling down. It's starting to resemble animation.
Right.
And if you look at like Rocket Raccoon and Tony and Iron Man, they're animated characters. They're straight up animated characters. It's not anything else.
Right.
And every movie that's shot on a green screen, that's just animation behind you. And it's photorealistic animation, so it's animation made to resemble a version of reality that we recognize as live action, but it's animation.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I don't think I really looked at it that way, but you're right. You're completely right. Because when we see like the behind the scenes photos, it'll be them in like half a uniform, a few like rocks or boulders they made, and then the rest of it just green screen and pretend that everything is it. Yeah, you're right. And since we're on animation, I watched the trailer for Captain Laserhawk, and I don't know how to do it. So it looks dope. I don't know how to completely describe my feelings about it, but it mixes so many different things. I kind of got a feel of like, was it Heavy Metal 2000? And then like there's a lot of stuff from like the 90s and the late 80s. This combines a little bit of everything. So what can people expect from this upcoming series?
Awesomeness, just awesomeness. I'm so lucky to have, well, one, to be able to work with Ubisoft, just a rad company. If you like any of their games or anything they've put out of the last few decades, it's just such a privilege to be able to work with them. And I've got, great creative executives from Ubisoft there. It sounds like I'm like dodging your question because I'm really stumbling on the thing. It sounds like I'm not dodging your question. I just don't know what to say other than this is like super rad, and I can't believe that we get to make this show. And you know, one of my concerns was, is there going to be an animation studio and a director who is going to get this and really be able to execute it in a way that's like, again, has an identity? And we found Bobby Pills. Actually, it was Hugo at Netflix. Sorry, we edit that back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just edit that. It was like really Netflix and Ubisoft. They were like, hey, what about these guys, Bobby Pills? And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. These guys are amazing, and they're rad. I mean, they're rad. They're like actively, you know, elevating the material, the idea, the concept, everything. Every day. Every day I'm blown away, and I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky to work with everyone involved in this.
Yeah, what's that feeling like? That like you have this idea and you're coming up with these concepts, and then to see the finished product and you're exceeds your expectations and you're blown away. What is that like? You know, when
It's really home, yeah.
You go home, you're like, yes. Like,
well, it's really three things. You know, one, you're kind of filled. You're filled with intense gratitude, right? Because you feel supported.
right.
You know, that's really kind of what this is. You know, as a consumer, when you're a consumer of these things, you're looking at the end product and you're going, oh wow, this is great, and that's, you know, I like this, I didn't like that. When you're a person who either makes things or has a role in making things, and the thing, when you look back at your life, really what ultimately matters was the relationships with the people who you worked with to make the things, right? It's the moments in between the moments. It's not the premiere and I parachuted down or whatever, like or man, I debuted some new face paint. It was so crazy. It's the relationships with the people, right? Because that ultimately, you know, your life is just a kaleidoscope of sounds and images, and then you're building a narrative of who you are around those sounds and images. So if those sounds and images are made up of people who are hyper talented, more talented than you, and are hyper supportive of you, that's an amazing life.
For sure. Yeah, you know, you got me up here, man. Yeah. I kind of feel like that's been the ongoing process mentally with Geek Vibes Nation is, you know, we're surrounded by good people. So like, even if it's the stressful times, it's like, but I rock with these people, they rock with me. So no matter what, you got this, you know, support system, friendship bond that is lasting. Yeah, you got me. You got me in the thinks, man. So you've been very vocal in the past about, and I didn't get to see what the final end result of the situation was, but I kind of wanted to bring it up because I was curious. But the Simpsons approved situation, with, you know, because I feel there's characters the same with me. There's characters that I've grown up and was like, how come this black character has to be this stereotype that people see, you know, them as, because that means you see me this way, and you might have reduced my personality to these certain aspects of my culture down to these certain things. And I assume that's kind of what your feeling was as well when you were vocal about it. But you know, tell us a little bit about it for those who don't know, and then what was the end result of the whole situation?
I mean, personally, I felt like the whole thing was a giant clusterfuck. the whole situation, right? Because this was in a period where there was a lot of societal questioning over what was being put out and what was being said, right? And people in the comedy community, comedians, stand-up comedians, sitcom people, I feel like a lot of them reacted like, oh, this is an attack on comedy. Right? So you had guys like Jerry Seinfeld, like going like, well, you know, it's comedy. You should like,
right.
So kind of missing the point of the larger narrative, but also making it an equally valid point. I would argue that, hey, where does freedom of speech stop and kind of social responsibility start?
Right.
So it was a complex situation, heightened by the fact that we now have this wonderful tool called the internet that allows you to just enter anyone's living room. So, you know, like there aren't really safe spaces like there were when we were growing up. So, you know, I think in a lot of ways, this conversation devolved into or descended into people yelling at each other and lacked the nuance.
Right.
And look, I'd had a issue with the Apu character for decades. I even made an Apu t-shirt in 2014. I still have it upstairs. So it, like, just kind of calling this caricature out, right? Because it's not really a stereotype. It was more of a caricature, and I think it was also heightened by the fact that there wasn't Indian representation in Western TV, and this was it, right? So it heightens that. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, so there's like one character, and it's this dude, and it's like, what the fuck? And it's voiced by a white guy. Like, what is going on? All right. I don't know how history will look at this entire thing, because again, the world, society, content, the way we're making content, the way we deal with each other, the way we interact with the global community at large is in a state of transition and evolving so rapidly. But yeah, really what happened was this is going to sound, so I was, happened to be hanging out with Kanye West. And we were just, pardon?
I said stunt button.
stunt button?
Yeah. The name Kanye, just so you know, it's a big name.
Yeah, it's a big name. Yeah. Big name, you know, brilliant guy, brilliant man. So we were just, you know, sitting and I was expressing something about Apu. And then he, you know, was like, hey, what would you do about it? And I like thought about it. I'm like, you know, it's interesting because no one's ever asked me that. And I've spent so much time trying to be like, hey, you know, what about this? What about this?
Right.
And then so we had a dialogue about it. And then I went and did a bunch of stuff. And then a week later, he was like, hey man, let's shoot a video of you talking about this, and I'll post it on my Twitter. Now, look, this is the same week where there were all these other Kanye shenanigans happening. But it was like a, yeah. So, you know, it became a thing. It wasn't really designed to call anybody out or create shenanigans. But you know, as with the internet or any hot button anything, shenanigans ensued. And yeah, that's kind of the long and the short of it. And then it ran its natural course.
Is it something that that lingers? That, like, does it ever just like you maybe that they didn't take it as seriously as they should when they heard? Because I mean, it was everywhere. But you know, when some of these corporations feel like we're this big and this person's not as big as we are? Do you think there was?
No. I don't. I feel like that is a narrative that one could have. You know, I feel like corporations, especially American corporations that create media for a global audience, right? They are conscientious. They have to be.
Right.
They have to be for their own survival, right? So it's not like like squat. It's not that. With The Simpsons specifically, you have a legacy content creator in Matt Groening,
right,
who's just been around for a while, and it's a marquee property for Fox. That's where the resistance came from, right? Because you have a guy who has effectively been doing this one thing for a very, very, very long time, and from his perspective, he's like, well, okay, so now we're in this fad of, oh, you can't do this and can't say that.
right.
And he just kept repeating, I'm proud of what I've done. I'm proud. It's kind of like really old dated people do. They keep saying, I'm proud of this. I'm like, okay, we get that you're proud.
Right.
No one's doubting that you're proud of it. The question is, should you be proud of it?
Right.
And look, and it just ran its course, and I think the issue is fundamentally resolved. At least I think, and the core of it was not really about Apu, because look, I can make the flip side of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side of the argument is, you do have Indian people who are like doctors and lawyers and entertainers like myself, entrepreneurs, right? Like who make like tech stuff and thing. You also have Indian Americans who own convenience stores. Right. So the flip side of it is like, well, if you're canceling this character or getting rid of this character, this character does represent. You could argue that this character represents a swath of people who, So I can see that side of it too. Again, this was like layered and complex and messy, and the conversation just needed to be had and play out, right? And I think the problem really boiled down to like people not talking.
Right.
And that made it kind of draw out. And then I think it sparked a seismic shift across the animation industry. And I think, again, when you look at The Simpsons, the writer's room, for instance, it's a lot of Harvard people. It's a lot of like Harvard people. It's Harvard kind of has like but so then again, there's like, again, perception is everything, right? So
yeah.
So then on the flip side, you have people who are Indian entertainers trying to be entertainers, working their way up, and you're seeing a bunch of like the Harvard elite making fun of us, and so it becomes an emotional issue for people. And I think this Apu in a sense becomes a punching bag for that, because you take like did you see a movie called The Social Network directed by David Fincher?
Yeah.
Do you know an actor named Max? His name is Max Minghella. Max Minghella. He was in the film.
Yeah.
In the film, right? And he played a real life character, right? So you have like Armie Hammer playing the Winklevoss twins, Jesse Eisenberg playing Zuckerberg, and this guy Max playing another person involved in the founding of Facebook, right? These are real people,
right?
So they're not, these aren't fictional characters. These are real people. In real life, that Max Minghella character is an Indian dude, like straight up Indian dude. Right? So look, is it an oversight? Maybe, whatever.
Right.
But then you do have a swath of the population going like, wow, even accomplishments get taken away and kind of recontextualized in a different way, right? So there's a lot boiling beneath the surface on this issue on both sides, both sides of the aisle, on all sides of the aisle, right? Because at the same time, you do have artists feeling, especially on the comedy vertical, right? And I'm not a comedian, so it doesn't really affect me that way. But you have comedians who genuinely feel like, oh, the world's gotten crazy. It's gotten dangerous for comedy now.
Yeah.
And that's the narrative that they're building, and that's the truth of their reality. So again, very very complex, and I'm eternally grateful to Kanye for kind of cattle prodding me on this one. Because this whole thing was like, dude, you have a voice and you're just not using it.
He's definitely good at
He's like a motivational speaker.
Yeah, he's good at putting it all out there and be like, look, man, go for it or don't, like, what you want to do. Yeah. So to shift gears into your newer stuff, what all do you have that you can talk about, have planned for this year going forward?
Are you asking about a specific project?
Oh, just in general. I know there's Captain Laserhawk comes out this year, right? If I'm correct, or is it next year? Next year.
Okay. We can talk about the project premiering at Cannes.
Yeah. That's I have it on here.
The Guardians of Justice.
Guardians of Justice, yes. And you've been working on that for years, correct?
Yeah, it's been 6.5 years at this point.
How does it feel to finally have it finished and ready to present to a wide audience?
It's a complicated wave of emotions. It's very complex, right? Because if you spend that much time on something, it ends up being so intertwined with every facet of your life. It just is, and on some level, like it even stops being a project and becomes an extension of you. So, I mean, the whole thing is surreal, bizarre. Just be super real with you. The project was a huge source of shame for me for a long time.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
I didn't fully understand that I'm an artist. I didn't get it. I don't know why. Something about it didn't click. So I was judging myself according to like business people metrics.
Okay.
Right. And business people are like, okay, how long did you spend? When is it out? It's all about like turnaround and right. And I literally judged myself through the lens of that. So, when I look back at like my 20s and early 30s, like objectively under those metrics, I felt like a failure.
I can feel that. I've had bouts of like imposter syndrome where I'm like, am I this thing? I know I do this thing, but like I don't feel like I measure up to what the expectation in my head, and am I meeting the expectations of what I think everybody else expects me to put out?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And then ultimately what you discover in that journey is it's an inward thing. It doesn't matter what anyone is saying to you about you, good or bad. It's all about your relationship with yourself.
Right.
Right. So for me, maybe there was imposter syndrome also, but it was just the lens through which I was viewing myself was just wrong. Was just wrong. Right. So you spend like, it wasn't until like it was a slow evolution to figuring this out, like figuring out who and what I actually am. But you know, if you look at like how many movies has Tarantino made? Right? It's not that many.
Yeah.
How many projects has any artist made? It's like not that many. So like the whole idea of like scaling and doing, you know, that whole thing, that's one way to go about life. But I'm not like a business dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I grew up around a lot of people with like a business mindset. So if you spend this much time, I mean, 6.5 years on something, that's not that's a significant chunk of time. And you look at it from like a business person mindset, you're like, the hell are you doing?
Right. Does it with it being that chunk of time that you spend, does that make something, does it make you feel more sensitive or hesitant to like put it out, or what may
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're like, okay, well, it's already 6.5 years, what's 7.5 years? It's like, well, you know, maybe we just shouldn't show this to anybody, you know?
Right.
And again, very few people have even, so like no one's seen it really. It's very unique, very, very different. It's anyone who's seen it, and again, very, very, like no one's seen it, but the tiny cabal who has seen it, all come back and say, this feels like I just had a conversation with you, but somehow this is in like a narrative form.
Okay.
So, you know, it feels like me on screen.
Oh, so do you feel like this is going to be, at least for now, this is the official representation of yourself to the world?
No, I mean, I feel like every all of it is, you know, every interview I've ever given, anything, because it's all a journey ultimately, right? Like
Right.
every project builds upon the last, you, not just in terms of skills, but emotional growth, hardships you experience. It's all one. The life of an artist is like it's a journey that builds upon itself. If you like game genie that motherfucker and like kind of skip to the end, it's a hollow victory at that point.
Yeah. So what do you see yourself and I'm not gonna do the whole like 5 years, but where do you see yourself leading to? I mean, I know right now you're in the digital platform realm at this moment. But what do you see? What do you see like with technology moving so fast? You know, now you went from, you know, you're in the space of digital platform. Do you see something else possibly coming that might be different from what we have now, that you're like, this is the move and I might make that journey as well?
I'm trying to go about all this with no expectations.
Right. That's probably the best way.
I can tell you, it's weird. We all have kind of gifts and tools that we use either consciously or subconsciously. With me, there's something where I'm able to kind of peek a few minutes into the future and see where the branches of the tree trunk will extend.
Right.
There's something going on there because there's a lot of me showing up a little like a few hours before something, you know, in the career thing. I can kind of speak to where I think things are heading in the macro sense of it.
Yeah.
But how do I fit into that? I have no idea, right? Because I feel like ultimately you have very little control. And it's just really about finding a spot where you can be useful to the collective at large. And I think we're headed into a VR, AR style metaverse in a kind of a automation dystopia.
Yeah. I almost forgot about VR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where, like, I think William Gibson and all cyberpunk novels should be required reading in school right now. It's like, okay, kids, read this book and prepare for this shit.
No, it's so crazy that we've had so much media through comic books, film, television shows that have shown us what we're leading to, and society at large has been like, and then when it starts to happen, they're like, oh my God, this is just like iRobot. Yeah, that's what the movie's trying to tell you. We've been leading down this road and we ignored it.
Okay. On the flip side, in society's defense, right? There has been a trend also simultaneously of cautionary tales. These are cautionary tales, right? Terminator, iRobot, RoboCop to some extent. I mean, sci-fi in general works best when it's a social commentary slash cautionary tale.
Yeah.
The Hollywood engine did pretty frequently take cautionary tales and then market them as like mindless blockbuster movies. So there is a desensitization that happens also, right? So it's not like I don't know, like the president or some or Kofi Annan getting on me like, guys, we need to really worry about the way we're treating technology and computers, because pretty soon it's going to have this and there's going to be an uprising, and what's like, no one had that conversation, right? Like people were like, oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I mean, if it happens, Will Smith will solve it, so I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, so
I mean, basically the problems of the future were marketed to us as mass populist entertainment. So I don't blame the population at large.
So do you think that it's
I mean, it's out at the same time of Lord of the Rings, right? So like if you're like little Timmy, like like a mass cyborg uprising and an orc army invading, like are like both equally fantastical outcomes. Until you realize, well, the first one is the path we're heading on. But anyways.
So do you think that it's creatives having a sense of the future, or technology scientists copying what has been made in the past?
I think all these things have a symbiotic relationship.
Okay.
Right? Like you go back to the beginning of this stuff, like Isaac Asimov, Star Trek. Even before that, like, and then that stuff's cool. You watch it, you read it, and you get inspired. And maybe you don't become a storyteller, maybe you become a scientist, and you're like, I want to build that. I want to build a death ray. That'd be sick.
So to kind of, I like to wrap things up in a fun way. If you were to live your life as a animated character, what would be your everyday outfit? What would it look like?
That's an amazing question. That is an amazing question. Wouldn't be He-Man. Does the outfit have like powers associated with, or is it just purely
It can.
aesthetics?
It can. It's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, then you just go with the Infinity Gauntlet or something like that, or like the Time Stone, right? Because then now you're not basing it on aesthetics or functionality, or sorry, aesthetics. You're purely basing it on functionality.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer.
Yeah.
So where can everyone find you on social media?
Just find me on Instagram at this point. At Bootleg Universe. At Bootleg Universe Instagram.
And is there any final thoughts you want to leave the people?
Nope.
So yeah, I appreciate your time, man. This was a great and insightful conversation. You're a true creative. I can tell by the way your mind works, and then of course what we've seen, and so it's great to talk to you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.